You think a little girl can scare me with a fairy tale about her mother? Officer Brett Callahan said, and the laughter that followed felt colder than the freezer aisle behind Ava Johnson's back. She stood near the front counter of Parker's Market, 11 years old, 5 feet tall in her school cardigan, both hands wrapped around the straps of a purple backpack that suddenly felt too heavy to carry. The store lights hummed above her, white and sharp, making every face around her look washed out and distant. A few customers had stopped pretending to shop. One man held a gallon of milk in his hand and stared. A woman near the greeting cards looked down at her phone, not typing, not calling, just looking away because looking away was easier. Behind the counter, Mrs. Ellen Parker kept her arms crossed like she had already decided the ending before the truth had even entered the room. Ava's cheeks burned, but she did not cry. Not yet. The small bottle of cold medicine she had paid for sat on the counter in a thin plastic bag, along with a roll of peppermints for her grandmother, who had been coughing since sunrise. That was all Ava had come for. Medicine, candy, and the short walk home before the sky turned completely dark. But now Officer Callahan had her backpack in one hand and a smirk on his face, flipping through her notebooks like her math homework might confess to something. "I told you," Ava said, her voice small but steady. "My mom is coming. She's in Special Forces." Callahan paused, then looked around the store as if Ava had just delivered the funniest line he had heard all week. "Special Forces," he repeated slowly, stretching the words until they became a joke. "Right. And I suppose she's going to drop from a helicopter onto Maple Street just to save you from a missing pack of batteries." A couple of nervous chuckles slipped out from the watching crowd. Ava's fingers tightened around each other. She wanted to explain again that she had not taken anything, that she had money, that Mrs. Parker could check the cameras, that the batteries were probably misplaced somewhere near the register where she had seen another customer standing minutes earlier. But every time she tried to speak, Callahan's grin told her he was not listening for truth. He was listening for weakness. Outside, evening traffic moved past the windows, headlights sliding across the glass like pale searchlights. The store was only 2 blocks from Ava's apartment, only 6 blocks from Lincoln Middle School, only 1 mile from the military housing office where her mother sometimes picked up official mail in a plain black SUV. But in that moment, it felt like Ava was standing 100 miles from anyone who knew her name. Callahan leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound personal and cruel without sounding loud. "Kids make up stories when they're caught," he said. "Especially kids who think rules don't apply to them." Ava lifted her chin. Her eyes were wet now, but her voice did not break. "My mom told me to stand tall when people try to make me feel small." The smirk faded for half a second, not because he felt shame, but because he did not like the way she said it. Then he laughed again, louder this time, filling the store with a sound that made Mrs. Parker look almost relieved. "Well," he said, holding up the backpack, "when your imaginary soldier mom walks through that door, I'll be sure to salute." And then, as if the night itself had been waiting for those exact words, the bell above the entrance gave one clean, sharp ring. The front door opened. Cold air swept across the floor. Every head turned. A tall black woman stepped inside wearing a dark field jacket, polished boots, and a calm so complete it seemed to silence the fluorescent lights. She did not rush. She did not shout. She looked first at Ava, then at the backpack in Callahan's hand, then at the officer's face. And when she spoke, her voice was low, controlled, and impossible to ignore. "Put my daughter's bag down." 40 minutes earlier, Ava Johnson had not been standing under the cold lights of Parker's Market with strangers watching her like she had done something wrong. She had been sitting in the last row of the Lincoln Middle School auditorium, swinging her feet beneath a folding chair, waiting for her name to be called for the winter showcase. Her purple backpack rested against her knees, and inside it were 2 sharpened pencils, a science worksheet, a library book about space, and a small envelope with $8.50 folded neatly inside. That money had come from her grandmother, Miss Ruth, who had pressed it into Ava's palm that morning and whispered, "For emergencies only, baby." At the time, Ava had smiled because nothing about the day felt like an emergency. The auditorium smelled like floor polish and paper programs. Parents filled the seats, holding phones in the air, waving at children on stage. Ava had searched the crowd for her mother out of habit, even though she already knew Sergeant Major Naomi Johnson would not be there. Naomi had kissed her forehead before sunrise, zipped up a dark jacket, and told her that duty had called earlier than expected. "I may miss the song," Naomi had said, kneeling in the kitchen so their eyes were level, "but I will never miss you." Ava had carried that sentence all day like a warm stone in her pocket. When her class finally stepped onto the risers, Ava sang softly at first, then stronger when she imagined her mother standing in the back with that quiet, proud look she never gave to just anyone. After the showcase, the hallway filled with noise, sneakers squeaking, lockers slamming, families laughing, teachers reminding students to take their coats. Ava checked her phone. 2 messages from her grandmother waited on the screen. First, a little heart. Then, "Cough is worse. Do not worry. I am making tea." Ava frowned at the words. Miss Ruth always said not to worry when she wanted someone to worry quietly. Ava called her, and when her grandmother answered with a tired voice, Ava heard the cough before she heard the hello. "I can stop by Parker's," Ava said. "It is only 2 blocks out of the way." Miss Ruth told her not to, told her it was getting dark, told her she could manage until Naomi got home. But Ava was her mother's daughter. She had watched Naomi handle problems by taking the next right step, not the easiest one. So Ava put on her coat, tucked the envelope into the front pocket of her backpack, and walked beneath the orange streetlights toward Maple Street. The air was cold enough to sting her nose, and the sidewalks were damp from a light rain that had passed through an hour before. Cars moved slowly along the curb. A flag outside the post office snapped in the wind. Ava kept to the bright side of the street, just like Naomi had taught her, and counted the storefronts as she passed them. Barber shop, dry cleaner, pharmacy that had already closed. Then Parker's Market, glowing at the corner with its red sign and fogged windows. She hesitated before going in, not because she was afraid, but because she knew that feeling, the one that sometimes arrived before anything happened. The feeling of being noticed too quickly. Still, her grandmother needed medicine. Ava pulled the door open, and the little bell rang above her head. Inside, the store was warm, narrow, and crowded with stacked displays of cereal, batteries, greeting cards, and last-minute holiday candy. Mrs. Parker looked up from the register. Her smile appeared for half a second, then disappeared when she saw Ava standing there alone. Ava gave a polite nod and moved toward the medicine aisle, unaware that from the moment she entered, the story had already begun changing in someone else's mind. The moment Ava stepped into Parker's Market, she remembered something her mother had told her on a rainy morning almost 2 years earlier. They had been standing in front of the bathroom mirror in their small apartment while Naomi Johnson brushed Ava's hair into 2 neat braids for picture day. Ava had been nervous because a boy in her class had said her hair looked too big the week before, and even though she had pretended not to care, Naomi had seen the way her daughter kept touching it, trying to make herself smaller. Naomi had set the brush down, placed both hands gently on Ava's shoulders, and looked at her reflection with the kind of calm that made the whole room feel stronger. "Listen to me, baby," she had said. "Some people will look at you and decide a whole story before you ever speak. They will be wrong, but you do not have to shrink to correct them." Ava had asked what she was supposed to do if they did not listen. Naomi had smiled just a little, the quiet kind of smile that came after hard years and harder lessons. "You stand tall. You speak clearly. You tell the truth once. Then you let the truth do its work." At the time, Ava had not fully understood. To her, Naomi was just mom, the woman who made scrambled eggs on Saturday mornings, checked homework with a red pen, and always knew where lost socks disappeared. But Ava also knew there was another part of her mother that the world treated differently. She had seen the pressed uniforms hanging in the closet, the polished boots lined up by the door, the sealed envelopes with government markings that Ava was not allowed to touch. She had heard adults lower their voices when Naomi entered a room. She had watched men twice her mother's size straighten their backs when Naomi said their names. Naomi never bragged about her work. She never needed to. Power, Ava had learned, did not always announce itself. Sometimes it walked quietly, spoke softly, and made careless people nervous without raising a hand. That was why Ava carried her mother's words with her as she moved down the medicine aisle, reading labels carefully under the bright store lights. Children's cough syrup, adult cold relief, throat lozenges. She picked up the brand Miss Ruth liked, checked the price twice, and counted the money in her envelope behind a display of paper towels where no one could see. $8.50. The medicine was $6.99 before tax. The peppermints were $1. It would be close, but enough. Ava felt proud of that. Not loud proud. Quiet proud. The kind that warms your chest because you are doing something kind without being asked. But as she walked toward the candy shelf near the counter, she felt eyes on her back. Mrs. Parker was watching from the register, her thin mouth pressed into a line. A man in a gray work jacket glanced at Ava, then at Mrs. Parker, then away. Ava pretended not to notice. She chose the peppermints, held both items where they were visible, and walked to the counter with careful steps. "Good evening," Ava said. Mrs. Parker did not answer right away. Her gaze dropped to Ava's backpack, then to the medicine, then back to Ava's face. "You here by yourself?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Ava said. "My grandmother is sick, and I am just getting this for her." Mrs. Parker scanned the medicine slowly, as if the barcode had personally offended her. Then the peppermints. Ava opened her envelope and placed the money on the counter, smoothing the bills with her fingertips the way her grandmother did at church bake sales. For one brief second, everything seemed normal. The register beeped. A car passed outside. The heater clicked on near the door. Then Mrs. Parker looked past Ava toward a small display beside the register and frowned. The cardboard hook holding a pack of batteries was empty. Her eyes narrowed, and the air changed so quickly Ava felt it before she understood it. Mrs. Parker leaned forward and said, "Where did those batteries go?" Ava blinked. "I do not know, ma'am." The store went quiet in that strange way places do when people sense trouble, but choose curiosity over kindness. Mrs. Parker looked down at Ava's backpack again, and this time there was no mistake in her expression. She had already written the story. Ava could feel it closing around her. Mrs. Parker did not say the word stealing at first. She did something worse. She let the accusation sit in the air without a name, heavy enough for everyone to feel, but slippery enough for her to deny later. Her fingers rested on the edge of the counter while her eyes stayed fixed on Ava's backpack. And for a moment, the only sound in Parker's Market was the low hum of the drink cooler near the back wall. Ava looked from the empty battery hook to Mrs. Parker, then to the plastic bag with the medicine and peppermints. "I only brought these up here," she said carefully. "You can check the receipt." Mrs. Parker gave a small laugh, but there was no warmth in it. "I know what I rang up." The man in the gray work jacket shifted his weight near the coffee machine. The woman by the greeting card stopped pretending to read a birthday card and listened with her head tilted down. Ava felt the store growing smaller around her, aisle by aisle, shelf by shelf, as if every box of cereal and every hanging coupon had turned into another witness, waiting for her to fail. "Maybe they fell," Ava said. "Maybe someone moved them." Mrs. Parker's eyes narrowed. "Funny how things only seem to move when certain people come in here." The words were not loud, but they landed hard. Ava swallowed. She had heard adults speak in that careful way before, saying something without saying it, wrapping unfairness in ordinary words so they could pretend it was only concern. Her mother had taught her to recognize that too. Ava stood straighter. "Ma'am, I did not take anything. I can wait while you check the cameras." That should have ended it. The camera was right above the counter. A small black dome pointed at the register and the display beside it. Ava could see it. Mrs. Parker could see it. Everyone could see it. But Mrs. Parker did not turn toward the monitor behind her. She reached under the counter and picked up the phone. "I think we need an officer here," she said. Ava's stomach dropped. "Please do not call the police. I did not do anything." The sentence came out faster than she wanted, and she hated how afraid it sounded. Mrs. Parker lifted the phone to her ear. "Then you should not be worried. Imagine being 11 years old, standing with medicine for your sick grandmother, knowing you told the truth, and still feeling the floor tilt beneath your shoes. Imagine watching adults choose suspicion because it is easier than checking a camera." Ava took one step back, then stopped herself. Running would make her look guilty. Crying would make them say she was dramatic. Staying silent would let them fill the silence with their own story. So she did what Naomi had taught her. She spoke once, clearly. "My name is Ava Johnson. I am in 6th grade at Lincoln Middle School. My grandmother is sick. I paid for the medicine. I did not take those batteries." The woman near the cards finally looked up, and for a second Ava thought maybe she would say something helpful. Instead, the woman only pressed her lips together and looked toward the door. Mrs. Parker stayed on the phone, her voice suddenly softer, sweeter, almost wounded. "Yes, officer, I have a young girl here. and I believe she may have taken merchandise. No, she is still inside. Yes, I am watching her. Watching her. As if Ava were something dangerous instead of a child with a backpack and $8.50. Minutes stretched. The plastic bag on the counter crackled when the heater clicked on again. Ava kept her hands where everyone could see them. She did not touch her backpack. She did not touch the medicine. She stared at the security monitor behind Mrs. Parker and wondered why truth could be so close and still ignored. Then red and blue lights slid across the front windows, painting the candy racks, the tiled floor, and Ava's small face in alternating colors. A patrol car stopped outside. The door opened. Officer Brett Callahan stepped in with his shoulders squared and his expression already decided. He looked at Mrs. Parker first, then at Ava, then at the backpack near her feet. He did not ask what happened. He did not ask for the camera. He only sighed, as if Ava had interrupted his evening by existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. "All right," he said, resting his hand on his belt. "Let us see what story we have got here." Officer Callahan's voice had the tired confidence of a man who believed the uniform gave him the ending before the story began. He walked past the first aisle without looking at the camera above the register, without looking at the receipt beside Ava's plastic bag, without looking at the empty battery hook long enough to wonder whether the truth might be somewhere other than inside a child's backpack. Mrs. Parker leaned toward him as if she were sharing a secret. "Those batteries were there before she came in," she said. "I keep a close eye on my store." Ava looked up quickly. "Ma'am, I never touched them." Callahan lifted one hand, palm out. Not gently, not kindly, just enough to stop her words from traveling any farther. "I am talking to the adult right now." The sentence made Ava go still. Not because it was loud, but because it placed her somewhere lower than everyone else in the room, as if being young meant being invisible, and being black meant being suspect before she opened her mouth. The man in the gray work jacket took a slow sip of coffee. The woman near the greeting cards turned one card over and over in her hands, reading nothing. Callahan asked Mrs. Parker a few questions, each one shaped to confirm what she already believed. Was Ava alone? Had she been near the counter? Did Mrs. Parker notice her backpack? Did she seem nervous? Ava wanted to say that anyone would seem nervous if a store owner watched them like a warning sign, but she kept quiet. Her mother's voice rose in her memory. "Stand tall. Speak clearly. Do not let panic speak for you." Callahan finally turned back to her. "What is your name?" "Ava Johnson." "How old are you?" 11. "Where are your parents?" Ava took a breath. "My grandmother is at home sick. My mom is on duty, but she is coming." One corner of Callahan's mouth lifted. "On duty doing what?" Ava hesitated, not because she was unsure, but because she had been taught not to throw her mother's work around like a shield. Naomi never liked that. Titles were not toys. Service was not a costume. But the room was closing in, and Ava needed someone to understand that she was not alone. "She is with Special Forces," Ava said. The words landed in the store, and for 1 second there was silence. Then Callahan laughed. It started as a short breath through his nose, then grew into something bigger, something performative, something meant for the room. Mrs. Parker looked down, but Ava saw the edge of a smile on her face. The man by the coffee machine raised his eyebrows. Callahan leaned back as if Ava had entertained him. "Special Forces," he said. "That is a new one." Ava felt heat rise behind her eyes. "It is true. Of course it is." He glanced toward Mrs. Parker. "They always have someone important on the way, do they not? A lawyer, a mayor, a secret agent, a famous uncle." "I did not say secret agent," Ava whispered. "I said my mom." Callahan's smile sharpened. "Then your mom can explain why her daughter is in a store after dark with missing merchandise. I paid for my things. That is not what we are discussing. You can check the camera." He paused then, and Ava thought maybe the word camera had finally reached him. Maybe he would turn around, ask Mrs. Parker to open the footage, and this would end. With an awkward apology no one really meant. But Callahan did not move toward the monitor. He looked at the backpack instead. "Open it." Ava's hands tightened. "My school things are in there." Then opening it should not be a problem. The store became very quiet. Ava slowly bent down, unzipped the front pocket, and pulled out her pencils, her folded science worksheet, and the library book about space. Callahan watched like he expected guilt to fall out between the pages. Nothing did. He reached for the larger pocket, but Ava stepped back just half a step. "Please," she said. My mom told me not to let strangers go through my bag without a reason. Callahan's face changed. The laughter faded, replaced by that cold irritation adults sometimes show when a child reminds them of a rule they plan to ignore. I am not a stranger, he said. I am the officer here. Ava looked at his badge, then back at his eyes. Then you should check the camera first. For the first time, Callahan stopped smiling completely. The room held its breath. And outside, far down Maple Street, a black SUV turned the corner. Callahan stared at Ava for a long second. And in that silence, the store seemed to divide itself into people who wanted the truth and people who only wanted the scene to end. The camera above the register watched everything without blinking. The receipt sat beside the plastic bag like a small white witness. The medicine was paid for. The peppermints were paid for. Ava had said the one thing that could solve it all, but Callahan acted as if checking the camera would be an inconvenience, as if the truth had to wait behind his pride. You have a lot of opinions for a child, he said. Ava did not answer. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, soft and fast, like rain tapping against a window. Mrs. Parker shifted behind the counter. Officer, I just want my merchandise back. Callahan nodded without looking at her. We will get to that. Then he reached down and picked up Ava's backpack before she could say another word. He did not yank it away. He did not need to. The power was in the assumption that she would not stop him, that a little black girl in a corner store would not dare say no to a badge. Ava's mouth opened, then closed. Her notebooks slid sideways inside the bag as Callahan held it by one strap and turned toward the counter. Please be careful, Ava said. My school project is in there. He gave a dry laugh. Now you are worried about school. The woman near the greeting cards finally spoke, but not to help. Maybe just let him look, sweetheart. It will be easier. Easier. The word felt almost cruel. Easier for whom? Easier for Mrs. Parker, who would not have to admit she was wrong. Easier for Callahan, who would not have to slow down and think. Easier for the people watching, who wanted the discomfort gone more than they wanted the child protected from it. Ava looked at each of them and realized that silence could be a crowd. Callahan placed the backpack on the counter and unzipped the main pocket. He pulled out her folder, her library book, a pencil case, and the folded program from the school showcase. The program slipped open, showing Ava's name printed under 6th grade chorus. He glanced at it, then tossed it beside the register like it meant nothing. Ava stepped forward. That is mine. Everything in this bag is part of the situation now, he said. His voice had become flat, official, and colder than before. Ava looked toward the door. Outside, headlights passed, then disappeared. The black SUV was closer now, turning slowly into the parking lot, but nobody inside noticed yet. Callahan reached into the side pocket and found the small envelope. He held it up. What is this? My grandmother gave me that money. For emergencies, he said, reading the words Miss Ruth had written on the front in blue ink. Something about his tone made Mrs. Parker smile again. Ava felt the sting of it, but she held her ground. Yes, she is sick. Callahan placed the envelope down, then leaned over the counter toward her. Ava, I am going to explain something to you. When people get caught, they start building little walls out of stories. Sick grandmothers, important mothers, school programs. But walls fall down. Ava looked him in the eyes, and even though her hands were trembling, her voice came out clear. I am not building a wall. I am telling the truth. The store went quiet again. For one brief moment, something flickered in the man by the coffee machine, something like doubt. His eyes moved to the camera, then to the empty battery hook, then to Callahan's hand on the backpack. But doubt without courage stayed useless. Callahan sighed, lifted the bag higher, and said, when your mother gets here, she can hear the same truth from me. Ava whispered, she will. That was when the parking lot outside filled with white headlights. A door closed. Boots touched wet pavement. The bell above Parker's Market rang once more, sharp and clean, and the cold air that entered seemed to carry discipline with it. Naomi Johnson did not enter the store like someone looking for permission. She entered like someone who had spent her life walking into rooms where panic had to make space for discipline. The bell above the door still trembled when she stepped onto the tile floor, tall and steady in a dark field jacket dampened by the evening mist. Her boots were clean but worn, the kind that had crossed more ground than anyone in that store could imagine. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her face calm, her eyes moving across the scene with quiet precision. First Ava. What eyes? Tight shoulders. Hands visible. Then the backpack on the counter. Open. School papers scattered. Then Mrs. Parker behind the register, suddenly busy with nothing. Then Officer Callahan, one hand still resting near Ava's belongings, his expression caught between annoyance and surprise. Naomi did not raise her voice. She did not rush to fill the room with anger. That was not how real authority moved. Real authority took inventory. Real authority breathed once, slow and controlled, and made everyone else realize they had been careless. "Put my daughter's bag down," she said. Callahan blinked as if the words had reached him before the meaning did. "Ma'am, this is an active investigation." Naomi's eyes did not leave the backpack. "Then preserve the property correctly." The sentence was quiet, but something in it shifted the room. Callahan straightened. Mrs. Parker's smile vanished. Ava looked at her mother and felt the first full breath enter her chest since the patrol lights appeared outside. Naomi stepped closer, not toward Callahan first, but toward Ava. She lowered herself just enough to look her daughter in the eyes. "Are you hurt?" "No, ma'am," Ava whispered. "Did you touch anything that was not yours?" "No, ma'am." "Did you pay for what you came to buy?" Ava nodded toward the plastic bag. "Yes, ma'am. Medicine and peppermints." Naomi looked at the receipt, then at the camera, then at Callahan. "Has anyone reviewed the footage?" The question sat there, clean and simple. Callahan adjusted his stance. "We are not there yet." Naomi stood fully now, and the air seemed to rise with her. "You opened a minor child's school bag before reviewing readily available video evidence." Nobody moved. The man near the coffee machine lowered his cup. The woman by the greeting card stopped, turning the same card in her hands. Mrs. Parker swallowed. Callahan's jaw tightened. "I asked for cooperation." Naomi's gaze sharpened, not loud, not wild, just focused enough to make his confidence look thin. Cooperation is not a substitute for procedure. Callahan looked her up and down, and Ava saw the moment he made the same mistake others had made before. He saw a black mother in a corner store before he saw anything else. He saw inconvenience before authority. He saw emotion before training. "And you are?" he asked, with a trace of the same laugh from earlier still hiding in his voice. Naomi reached inside her jacket slowly, deliberately, giving no one a reason to pretend they felt threatened. She removed a leather credential holder and opened it with one hand. The light caught the identification card, the seal, the rank, the name. Sergeant Major Naomi Johnson, United States Army Special Operations Command. The silence changed shape. It was no longer the silence of people waiting to see if a child would be accused. It was the silence of adults realizing they had been standing on the wrong side of a story that was still being recorded. Callahan's eyes dropped to the credentials, then lifted back to Naomi's face. The laugh was gone. Naomi closed the holder and slid it back into her jacket. "Now," she said, each word measured, "you will step away from my daughter's belongings. You will request your supervisor, and you will make sure that camera footage is preserved before anyone in this store touches another thing." Callahan opened his mouth, but no answer came out quickly enough to save him. Outside, another patrol car turned into the lot, its headlights washing over the windows. Ava stood beside her mother, small but no longer alone, and for the first time that night, the room understood that truth had not arrived angry. It had arrived prepared. The second patrol car stopped beside Callahan's cruiser, and the glow from its headlights stretched across Parker's Market like a pale warning. A moment later, Captain Marcus Reed stepped inside, buttoning the front of his coat against the cold. He was in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes that had seen enough bad nights to recognize one before anyone explained it. His gaze moved from Ava's scattered school papers to Naomi's still posture, then to Callahan's face. "What happened here?" he asked. Callahan answered too quickly. "Possible shoplifting call. Store owner reported missing batteries. Minor matched the circumstances. I was conducting a basic check." Naomi did not interrupt. She let the words stand there, thin and exposed. Captain Reed looked toward her, and the moment his eyes settled on her credentials, something changed in his expression. Recognition did not arrive loudly. It arrived as a tightening around the mouth, a slight lift of the chin, a man remembering a name from briefings where careless officers were not invited. "Sergeant Major Johnson," he said. Callahan turned his head. Mrs. Parker's fingers froze over the register keys. Ava looked up at her mother, then at the captain, and understood that her mother had not needed to explain herself because people who truly knew power already knew how to recognize it. Naomi gave one small nod. Captain Reed. Reed's eyes dropped again to the backpack. Officer Callahan, why are this child's belongings on the counter? Callahan's throat moved. She was asked to open the bag. Was the camera footage reviewed first? Callahan hesitated, and that hesitation did more damage than an admission. Reed turned toward Mrs. Parker. Is your security system working? Mrs. Parker's voice was suddenly smaller. Yes, it works. Then pull it up. Nobody laughed now. Nobody whispered. The store had become a courtroom without a judge, and the camera was about to testify. Mrs. Parker moved to the small monitor behind the counter, her hands not quite steady as she clicked through the recording. The screen showed Ava entering the store, holding her backpack straps, walking straight to the medicine aisle. It showed her choosing the cold medicine. It showed her counting money. It showed her picking up peppermints and approaching the register. Then it showed the battery display clearly. The missing pack was still there when Ava passed it. The man in the gray work jacket stepped closer to the counter in the video, balancing his coffee, his phone, and a newspaper. His elbow brushed the display. The pack of batteries slipped off the hook, fell behind a cardboard soda sign, and disappeared from view. Ava never touched it. She never even looked at it. The room became so quiet that the clicking of the monitors sounded like a clock counting down someone's excuse. Mrs. Parker stared at the screen, color draining from her face. Callahan did not move. Naomi looked at Ava, and Ava looked back with tears finally sliding down her cheeks, not because she had been proven innocent, but because everyone else had needed a machine to believe what she had already said. Captain Reed inhaled slowly. Officer Callahan, he said, step outside with me. Callahan's mouth opened. Captain, I was responding to a complaint. You responded to an assumption, Reed said, his voice low enough to be controlled but firm enough to end the argument. You searched a child's property before checking available evidence. You dismissed her request for a camera review. You escalated a store owner's suspicion into public humiliation. Mrs. Parker whispered, I did not mean for it to go this far. Naomi finally turned toward her. That is the problem. People rarely mean for it to go this far. They just start it, then let someone else carry the harm. The words settled over the counter, over the empty battery hook, over the school program lying open beside the register. Reed looked at Callahan again. Outside. Now. This time Callahan obeyed. The badge on his chest still caught the light, but it no longer seemed to carry the room. Ava stood beside Naomi as her mother gathered each school paper, each pencil, each small piece of dignity that had been handled like evidence. And for the first time that evening, every person in Parker's Market understood that the smallest voice in the room had been telling the truth from the beginning. Outside the glass doors, Officer Callahan stood under the red and blue lights with Captain Reed, no longer performing for a crowd, no longer protected by laughter. Through the window, Ava could see his shoulders lower as Reed spoke to him in short, controlled sentences. There was no shouting. There did not need to be. Consequences did not always arrive with noise. Sometimes they came in the quiet movement of a supervisor taking notes, the careful preservation of video footage, the request for a written statement, the sudden realization that every careless word had been recorded by cameras, witnesses, and memory. Inside Parker's Market, Naomi Johnson finished placing Ava's school papers back into the purple backpack with the same care she used when folding a flag or handling a letter from a soldier's family. One pencil had rolled under the edge of the counter, and the man in the gray work jacket bent down to pick it up. He held it out to Ava, but he did not meet her eyes at first. I am sorry, he said softly. I should have said something. Ava took the pencil. Thank you. It was a small answer, but it carried more grace than he deserved. The woman by the greeting card set the card down without buying it and walked toward the door, her face tight with shame. Mrs. Parker remained behind the register, staring at the frozen security image of the batteries fallen behind the soda sign. The truth was right there on the screen, simple and ordinary, which somehow made the damage feel even heavier. She cleared her throat. Ava, she said, and her voice cracked around the name. I am sorry. I made a mistake. Naomi looked at her then, not with rage, but with a disappointment so steady it made the apology feel smaller. A mistake is giving someone the wrong change, Naomi said. What happened here was a choice. You chose suspicion over evidence. You chose fear over fairness. And when my daughter told you the truth, you made her prove her innocence instead of proving your accusation. Mrs. Parker's eyes filled, but Naomi did not soften the sentence just to make the room comfortable. Ava listened carefully, because this was one of the things her mother did best. She did not humiliate people. She made them stand in front of what they had done. Captain Reed returned a few minutes later, bringing the cold air with him. He removed his hat and looked at Ava directly. Miss Johnson, I owe you an apology on behalf of this department. What happened tonight was not acceptable. Your mother and I will make sure it is documented properly. Ava nodded, but her voice was barely above a whisper. Will he still be a police officer? Reed glanced through the window at Callahan, then back to Ava. That depends on the review. But tonight, he is relieved from this call, and the report will include everything that happened before I arrived. Naomi placed one hand on Ava's shoulder. Including the camera footage, she said. Including the camera footage, Reed confirmed. Mrs. Parker quietly pushed the plastic bag with the medicine and peppermints toward Ava. No charge, she murmured. Naomi did not touch the bag. She already paid. The words were simple, but they restored something. Ava reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the receipt, and held it with both hands for a moment before placing it safely inside her backpack. She had paid. She had told the truth. She had stood tall. When they finally stepped outside, the night air felt colder but cleaner. Naomi opened the passenger door of the black SUV, then knelt beside Ava before letting her climb in. Did I do something wrong? Ava asked. Naomi's face changed then, not into anger, but into tenderness. She brushed a loose braid away from Ava's cheek. No, baby. Some people mistake your skin for permission. Tonight, they learned it is not. Ava leaned into her mother, and for a moment the streetlights, the patrol cars, the store, and the watching faces all faded behind the safety of that embrace. Across the lot, Callahan looked toward them once, but he did not laugh. His badge still reflected the flashing lights, but it no longer looked like power. It looked like metal, small and silent, pinned to a man who had finally learned that truth does not need to shout when it walks in prepared.